Imagine a world where women were treated like property, where a woman's worth was based on her ability to bear children, where a barren woman was considered a curse, a failure. This was the world of Sarai, Abraham's wife. For years, she had longed for a child, but her womb remained empty. Her husband, Abraham, though kind, was also a product of his time. He believed that a man's legacy was through his sons. In desperation, Sarai turned to her Egyptian slave, Hagar. "Go, sleep with my slave," she pleaded. "Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abraham, though hesitant, agreed. He knew it was not right, but his desire for a child was stronger than his conscience. Hagar, young and innocent, was terrified. She knew what this meant, but she also knew that refusing her mistress would mean certain doom. So she submitted to Abraham's will, and soon she was pregnant. Joy filled Sarai's heart. Finally, she would have a child, a son to carry on her husband's name. But her joy was short-lived. As Hagar's belly grew, so did her pride. She began to look down on her mistress, treating her with contempt. Sarai was furious. She felt betrayed, used. She blamed Abraham for her misery, and she vowed to make Hagar pay. One day, she could no longer bear Hagar's arrogance. She took her aside and said, "You are a disgrace to me. You think you are better than me just because you are pregnant, but I will not tolerate your insolence." Hagar, terrified, fled from her mistress. She wandered the desert, lost and alone, her belly heavy with child. Just as she was about to give up hope, she saw a spring in the distance. She ran towards it, her feet stumbling on the sand. As she reached the spring, she collapsed on her knees, gasping for breath. Suddenly, she heard a voice. "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going?" Hagar looked up and saw an angel standing before her. She was so startled that she jumped to her feet. "I am running away from my mistress Sarai," she stammered. "She is mistreating me because I am pregnant." The angel smiled. "Do not be afraid, Hagar," he said. "I am sent by God to help you. Go back to your mistress and submit to her, and know that your son will build a great nation." Hagar was stunned. She could not believe what she was hearing, but she had no choice. She had to go back to Sarai. When she returned, she was met with a cold reception, but she was determined to be strong. She knew that God was with her, and sure enough, she gave birth to a healthy son. She named him Ishmael, meaning God hears. Ishmael grew up to be a wild and rebellious young man. He often clashed with his half-brother, Isaac, who was born years later. But despite their differences, Ishmael and Isaac remained brothers. And so, the story of Hagar and Ishmael continues to this day, a testament to the power of faith and the resilience of the human spirit. Abraham, an old man with no children, had just been promised by God that he would be the father of a great nation. But this blessing came with a strange and painful condition. Abraham was terrified. He was already an old man, and circumcision was a dangerous procedure. But he knew that he could not disobey God. So, he gathered all the males in his household, and with a trembling hand, he circumcised them all. The pain was excruciating, but Abraham persevered. He knew that this was a test of his faith, and he was determined to pass it. And pass it he did. Abraham's descendants became a great nation, just as God had promised. And the covenant of circumcision became a symbol of their faith and identity. But the story of Abraham and the covenant of circumcision is not just about faith and obedience. It is also a story about love and sacrifice. Abraham loved God so much that he was willing to do anything he asked of him, even if it meant pain and suffering. And God loved Abraham so much that he gave him a son, even though he was too old to have children naturally. The covenant of circumcision is a reminder that God's love is unconditional. He will always be there for us, even when we make mistakes or fail to live up to his expectations. It was a scorching day in the land of Canaan. Abraham, an old man with a wrinkled face and a long white beard, sits outside his tent, gazing at the endless expanse of desert. Suddenly, 3 men appear before him, their faces etched with mystery and authority. Abraham is startled, but he quickly recovers and welcomes the strangers with open arms. He offers them water to quench their thirst and a delicious meal to satisfy their hunger. As they eat, the men tell Abraham that they are messengers from God. The first messenger announces that Abraham's wife, Sarah, will bear him a son, even though she is past the age of childbearing. Abraham and Sarah are overjoyed, but also a little skeptical. After all, they are both old and have been trying to have a child for many years. The second messenger tells Abraham that he will be the father of a great nation, and that his descendants will bless all the nations of the earth. Abraham is humbled by this news, but he also feels a sense of responsibility. The third messenger warns Abraham that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are filled with wickedness and that God is planning to destroy them. Abraham pleads with God to spare the cities, and eventually, God agrees to spare them if there are at least 10 righteous people living there. Abraham leaves the three messengers and returns to his tent, his heart filled with a mixture of joy, fear, and hope. He knows that his life is about to change, and he is ready to embrace the challenges and blessings that lie ahead. The air hung heavy with the stench of sulfur. Smoke billowed into the sky, blotting out the sun. Lot, his eyes wide with terror, watched in disbelief as the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah crumbled into dust. Just hours before, he had welcomed two mysterious strangers into his home, unaware that they were angels sent by God to warn him of the impending doom. The city, once a bustling hub of activity, had descended into chaos as the men of Sodom, driven by lust and greed, demanded that Lot hand over his guests. Lot, desperate to protect his visitors, had offered his own daughters instead. But the men were enraged. They threatened to harm Lot and his family, their voices rising in a terrifying chorus. The angels, with a swift and terrifying display of power, struck the men blind, saving Lot and his family from the wrath of the mob. They urged Lot to flee, to escape the impending destruction. But Lot, paralyzed by fear, hesitated. He begged the angels to allow him to flee to a nearby, smaller town. Reluctantly, they agreed. As Lot and his family fled, they witnessed the horrifying spectacle of the cities being consumed by fire and brimstone. Lot's wife, unable to resist the temptation to look back, was instantly transformed into a pillar of salt, a chilling reminder of the consequences of disobedience. Lot and his daughters escaped the destruction, but their lives were forever changed. They found refuge in a cave, isolated and alone. Driven by despair and the fear of extinction, Lot's daughters resorted to a desperate act. They tricked their father into drinking wine and then slept with him, ensuring the continuation of their family line. This tragic event, a consequence of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, left a lasting mark on history, giving rise to the Moabite and Ammonite people. What can we learn from Abraham's mistake? Click here to watch now.